Namaskar and welcome back to Media Scan, your weekend dose of headlines, controversies and perspectives. The US Congress has invited Prime Minister Modi to address a joint session there, which PM Modi has graciously accepted. Meanwhile, all of this week, we saw headlines about hectic parleys going on for defense technology transfer, for tech trade, for people-to-people contacts and a lot more. Why then is a section of people both here and in the US trying to put a spanner on this very important trip? To get the answer to some of these questions, I have here with me on Media Scan a special panel this evening. Joining me here, Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, well-known diplomat, has served the nation in various parts of the world. He is joining Media Scan for the first time. Welcome, Ambassador Wadhwa. Namaskar.
Thank you.
And also with us, Major General Sanjay Meston, veteran, strategic affairs analyst. You have been hearing his thoughts on various television and digital platforms. Welcome back, General Meston.
Thank you, Smita.
And also with me, founder of the Ushanas Foundation, geopolitical affairs expert, Abhinav Pandya. Welcome back, Abhinav.
Thank you very much.
My first question comes to Ambassador Wadhwa. Sir, there are clearly two streams of thought going on about the Prime Minister's upcoming visit to the US. On the one hand, there are writings and commentaries about how half a dozen Indian Prime Ministers have addressed the US Congress, which includes Prime Minister Modi. However, there is also a stream of thought which says this address to the joint session cannot be compared with those previous events because it has a special place in the history of the US Congress. What are your thoughts, Ambassador?
So I think it's a clear, there's clear political clarity and commitment as far as the United States administration is concerned that a special address by Prime Minister Modi will be an apt occasion on this visit of Prime Minister to United States. And there are two or three very special reasons for that, why that is important.
Yes.
First, of course, is the growing convergence of interests that both the United States and India see for themselves in the current geopolitical situation. Secondly, is the scale of diplomatic engagement that we have seen recently because of the number of programs which have come into fruition right now, ranging from the ICET down to the defense cooperation programs between the two sides.
Yes.
And third is a very common agenda which has emerged. The ICTG on critical technologies is very important for both United States and India in the current context and takes forward what we started with the next steps in strategic partnership. But also because the private sector in the United States sees India as a very important partner to invest into and also to make sure that the two countries can connect not only in the civilian side, but also in the defense innovation side and the industrial side to go forward in this relationship. And that is why we've had a number of visits to prepare for the agreements that are supposed to be signed during this forthcoming visit of the Prime Minister.
Yes.
It's therefore very apt that an address in Parliament by the Indian Prime Minister, where he outlines his vision for this bilateral relationship, an overall vision, the direction in which it will go in the future is spelled out. And that is the reason why the United States is very keen that this address takes place at this time.
Yes, and really Ambassador Wadhwa, on how much of a leap, his message will be when he addresses the joint session finally later this month. I would like to come back to you on that. But first, if I may have General Meston here. General Meston, again, like I said earlier, there are two very clear streams of thought when it comes to these defense talks, particularly on that technology transfer in the GE-414 aircraft, the jets. What is being pointed out is, had the global situation not been what it is, I am referring to the Ukraine conflict, and had India not taken that fiercely independent position that we have, perhaps the US would not have, stressed so much on technology transfer which is not the same thing as selling arms or defense equipment. They clearly want to wean away India's dependence on Russia when it comes to defense cooperation. So, clearly there is a convoluted kind of theory going on, which is a little different from what Ambassador Wadhwa just said about US being keen to strengthen our ties. How do you look at it, sir?
Smita, good evening. Absolutely, my personal views are that today in the geostrategic realm, I think India's position is very, very significant. And there are large number of reasons. Firstly, a geographical location itself gives us an advantage in the entire, I would say, East Asia, the West Asia, and even we have an influence right up to Africa. Second, the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific region, we have a great influence. And therefore, as Ambassador Wadhwa has also brought out, America and we as Indians, we have a joint collaboration and convergence of strategic interest in this entire region, I would say in basically Asia, including the Indo-Pacific region.
Yes.
So our location and our significance has enhanced considerably. If we just go back into history, in the past 4 decades, America was very closely aligned with Pakistan. Reason being, after the intrusions or invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 by Russia, that is erstwhile USSR, the American interests obviously were in Pakistan, and it continued right up to 2019 because they were fighting their battle with Al-Qaeda and Taliban, for which logistically they were dependent on Pakistan.
Yes.
So Pakistan's significance has totally now withered away, and now with the new geostrategic realm existing, that the major competitors today to America is, one is China, and convergence of China and Russia on the other hand. And both the countries, especially China, is having a lot of influence in Indo-Pacific, West Asia. It has now done the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and Africa also it has made a lot of inroads. So therefore,
just a query here, a counter question rather. Had India not been in such a position and we were not going to be instrumental in US vision of containing China, do you think India would have mattered so much as it is, as we can see now?
India was going to matter firstly because the center of gravity in the last few years has shifted to Asia. And in the Indo-Pacific, it is not only with relevance to China, in the entire Indo-Asian, Indo-Pacific region. And therefore, since we have also got hostilities with China, and therefore competition is now between China and the United States. So therefore our position has become more significant, and whatever it is in the last few years, we have risen as a great, I would say, superpower influence in the entire world, whether it is in, global south or wherever it is. Whole world today respect India, including all these small Pacific island countries. Recently, we have seen with the Prime Minister visit. So significance has enhanced. So there are 2 basic reasons. One is the geostrategic location and the changing geostrategic environment. And second is collaboration and convergence between India and US against China, and maybe the China-Russia alliance, which is now seen to be emerging in the near future. So
Fine.
therefore,
and I think all these factors are somewhere all related to each other. We cannot separate one from the other. But on whether this is really the century of Asia, as Prime Minister had once said, I'll come back to you on that, sir. Can I bring in Abhinav Pandya into the discussion here? Abhinav, Rahul Gandhi, who was recently in the US, raised a lot of questions about, the realities of Indian democracy, and certainly this was not the first time. In his earlier foreign tours, his visits abroad, he has brought focus on the fact which he thinks that Indian democracy is in danger. But it doesn't end here. There are organizations like the IAMC, etc., who are running a vicious signature campaign and media narrative saying Prime Minister should not be allowed to address the US Parliament, also demanding, creating a kind of a debate about what is going on in India's democracy, and a whole lot of population is being disenfranchised, and their empowerment is being reduced, etc. The US Department, or rather the White House statement by John Kirby, which clearly said that India is not only a vibrant democracy, but someone who wants to see the strength of Indian democracy must come to New Delhi. Do you look at this as a snub to all these elements who are trying to defame and run down our democracy? Or do you think the US might be playing both sides at the same time?
Thank you very much, Smitaji. Very interesting question. I guess, there can be different takes to this question. First of all, Rahul Gandhi, well, we don't need to take him very seriously. He has often made a fool of himself by making some very frivolous statements in the past also. Like I remember in Feb 2022, he said that this government, like Modi government's foreign policy has brought China and Pakistan closer. Americans were the first to reject that statement. They said that we don't endorse it. Right now also,
Yes.
they are, they're saying that India is a vibrant democracy. What's most important here is that why Americans are doing that. Here, well, we have to understand that, certainly there is a hidden arm of the US state, which includes a big cabal of NGOs, environmental institutions, credit rating agencies, and various NGOs, press freedom index rating agencies, etc. And they are often used to pressurize India, particularly on the matters of democracy, human rights, etc., which are used. But these linkages are with the deep state, so it's difficult to prove them. But now India has become a very important country in the strategic calculus of the United States, because they want India to act as a bulwark against China, and they're also looking at India to be the part of NATO plus. So I think we should take all these things with a pinch of salt, and we have to go for a very cautious engagement with the US. With US, it's an interest-based relationship, and we still don't know what they are up to with China. I mean, what they want with China. I mean, if they're really seriously, wholeheartedly focused on containing China, they won't be spending billions of dollars in Europe against Russians. So we have to make sure that we are not used or consumed in this, American, drive against China. So we have to go for a very cautious engagement.
Right. Ambassador Wadhwa, do you agree that while there are a lot of good things coming out of the US establishment, we need to have a cautious kind of engagement with them? There is always a power center in the US also in the establishment, which while on the one hand is having such a healthy and robust interaction with the Indian government, at the same time, they are trying to prop up NGOs and other organizations who are very clearly defaming our democracy. They have a sinister plan in hand, and we saw some of it unfolding, some of it is still unfolding. Also, your views about the White House statement, do you think it was a snub to those elements? What exactly in your eyes is America doing?
I think to me it is very clear that India has emerged as a critical factor and an actor, and therefore there is a push to improve this relationship with New Delhi. And this is part of the United States focus on the Indo-Pacific, and also very clearly a focus on containing China for the future.
Yes.
That's point number one. Secondly, I think, the national security posture of the United States cannot be determined by a few critics of Indian democracy. No global problem today can be addressed without India in the room. And so therefore, I see this as a clear direction from the National Security Council to the State Department to the Pentagon. All officials have said that they have a clear directive from their bosses to make the India relationship work. And in the words of, in fact, one policymaker, which I was reading the other day, our grandchildren will be ruled otherwise by the Chinese.
Yes.
So the differences are there, of course, but I think there is this clear direction which has emerged. Otherwise, we will not have this kind of an engagement which has emerged. And I wanted to elaborate a little bit on this, and you will see the results of this fructifying during the visit of Jake Sullivan and Kurt Campbell, which will happen in the very near future, in fact, next week.
Yes.
And in the run-up to this, of course, we've had Defense Secretary Austin, who's been here. The Foreign Secretary Vinay Quatra has been in Washington. Before that, we had a lot of engagements on the commercial side. Gina Raimondo was in Delhi in March. Our own Finance Minister and Commerce Minister were in Washington. So this is a wide-ranging relationship, which has now become covers a number of sectors. It's not just a unidirectional relationship.
Yes.
And I'm very clear
And,
that this is the direction that it will take in the future, regardless of any criticism that we may hear about
Sir,
India.
very quickly, sir, did you see some reports about the fact that Mr. Rahul Gandhi may have had a quiet visit to the White House and met certain functionaries there? What do you think?
Well, that's part of the US democratic process, and I think we should take it as that and not read too much into this.
Okay, you don't think there is much to read into it, even if it happened. We still do not have a confirmation on that. But coming back to General Meston, General, considering the kind of the neutral, or I would say independent position that India has taken on its defense ties, its country to country foreign relations, now that we see this level of engagement with the US going, many notches higher, how long do you think we are in a position to maintain our neutrality? Do you think all these engagements are in a way going to become a cause of worry somewhere in the coming future? We may have to think twice, or do you think we can have our cake and eat it too?
A very good question, Smita. Firstly, our national interests or national concerns are very clear today. The biggest threat to India is China. That is our enemy number one, and I can state it very confidently.
Yes.
Now, if they are enemy number one, so we have to keep everything emanating from this thought process. Now, if this is the thought process, tomorrow, if let us assume there is a conflict between India and China, we are presently most of the time dependent on Russia. That time, would Russia continue with the SOS, that is the security of supply chain system? That is a big question mark, which all of us should know, because seeing the good relationship between China and Russia, so therefore the answer actually is well known to everyone. And let me be very candid, as a lieutenant colonel, when I was looking the operational logistics of the Indian Army in the Kargil war, we were dependent on Russia. Yes, they gave us a lot of weapons and equipment, but let me today be very candid. There are certain things known as iceberg cost or iceberg concept. In most of these deals, you get the weapon system, but thereafter, a weapon system, when it is inducted, it lasts for at least 40 to 50 years. And therefore, we continue to get maintenance, spare parts, lubricant, greases, everything on that.
Yes.
And those are 90% cost. And I remember Russia that time was demanding its pound of flesh because we had to really run around and we were not getting things timely. Therefore, a very important point which is emerged, India shall and should not rely on any one country. And our security itself is when we start diversifying our portfolios today, whether it is with United States, with France,
Point taken.
Yeah.
Point taken, sir. But very quickly, what do you think really changed the trajectory? Some people are pointing at the Russia-Ukraine situation. Some are saying, the world is not what it used to be. Pakistan is not a force anymore. China's threat is the biggest thing. Others say, no, it is many reasons put together. We cannot simply put it all on China, Pinning everything on China is not fair. What really do you think changed the trajectory, sir?
Yeah, there are 3-4 main reasons which have changed the trajectory. Of course, the Indo-Ukraine war neutrality has been seen and our national interest has been kept. More than that, the convergence of interest between India and the United States over China in the Indo-Pacific region and other parts of East Asia, West Asia, even Africa. So that is point number 2. And point number 3 is our own interest. Today we cannot depend on Russia only. So therefore we have diversified our procurement, etc. with so many countries. So that itself is enhancing our security and therefore our neutrality remains. But you raised a very pertinent question. In the near future, can we continue our neutrality? I perhaps feel for a lot of time we can continue our neutrality because even Russia requires that today. China also understands our leanings with Russia and the rest of the world. So China is today in so till the time we continue our neutrality, our position remains very good. But if there is a conflict, then perhaps our stance of neutrality may have to take a little pro any country, whichever is supporting to us. And who will support us maximum? I doubt if Russia will support us in a case of a Indo-China conflict scenario. We will get more support from the Indo-US, from the United States. And
we'll see, we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. But General Meston, please allow me to get a quick comment on the same question from Ambassador Wadhwa. Quickly, sir, what do you think changed the trajectory of Indo-US relations? Is it only China? And also, How long do you think we can maintain this very independent, neutral position?
Well, besides China, of course, there are many other factors that have come together. First of all, if you look at the grouping of I2, U2, and the big infrastructure push that the United States wants in the Middle East, along with connectivity, that's also in part to contain the push by China and its Belt and Road Initiative. But at the same time, if you look at the East, there is no Indo-Pacific and the Quad without India. And whether it's India or United States, we don't have to say either or. We have to say that both sides want it. In fact, the Quad collectively would like to stick together in the current situation because of the Chinese threat. And also, I think both sides want to bridge the gap that had happened. How far they can cooperate in the current circumstances is now a much better roadmap than it was before, because the direction is very clear. And
Yes.
that is why we've had some hardcore preparations which have gone into this particular visit of the Prime Minister. So if the United States wants to lock India, even if we take that argument, into its wider defense architecture, obviously it will require flexibility in its export controls, and also a significant signal to its private sector that it must then invest in India.
Yes, sir.
We know that
Yes, sir.
there
Please
is
make your point.
connectivity in defense, but also the private sector becomes important.
Fine, fine. Abhinav Pandya, coming to you quickly. Ambassador Wadhwa has just mentioned about the private sector. We are seeing Apple and Google and all the, the biggest tech giants gunning for India. At the same time, there is a lot of interest in startups, and at the same time, people are also trying to engage Indian professionals at various levels. All that is fine. But, we do have our experiences where America on the one side has been strengthening its ties with India. It's at a point it was of never before what we are witnessing now. But at the same time, there are moments when they do prop up those powers who are trying to, create divisiveness in our own country and put up challenges to our unity, the harmony of our society. How do you see that part of the game going on? Because we have had a couple of statements in the past about India's democracy, US, watching it very keenly, and those back-to-back reports about religious freedom in India and the press freedom, etc. Of course, government has rejected all those reports, but those questions do remain.
I think some of these issues are very fundamental issues. First and foremost, our history, our relationship and its history with the US, like over the past 50, 60 years, has not been of a friendship which comes out very naturally. There have been occasions of distrust, uneasiness, discomfort, even after we started getting closer. Even now, I feel that there's some sort of communication gap or distrust, discomfort prevails. Secondly, we must understand the nature of the Western societies. It's a culture in the Western societies to have such organizations like NGOs and democracy rating agencies and all. And more we get into the kind of developments which we are seeing in India in the recent past, like our action against Islamic extremism or movement towards Hindutva nation or like Hindu Rashtra. So certainly these guys are going to get a little uneasy about it. Even the Christian conversion racket which is going on in the country, that makes the clergy and many other organizations in the US very uncomfortable. So I think we should expect some kind of a backlash, and certainly, these elements, as we have seen in the past also, like they can always
but
try
one thing, very quickly, Abhinav, because I have to wind up now. Quickly, it's fine to say that there is a culture in the West, and these NGOs, etc., they do meddle in the affairs of not only India but various other countries.
Yes.
However, we cannot overlook the fact that there are people inside our own country, Indians essentially, who are providing the ammunition to these people. Are they not?
Certainly they are, and some of these people, they go for fellowships, they go for educational programs, they go for other conferences, and certainly, some of these lobbyists have been very active. Mr. Ghulam Muhammad Fai, who was working in the US for a very, very long time, working for Pakistan. You have all these organizations like IAMC and all, where they have representatives from Hamas, from all these Kashmir-centric terrorist groups like Lashkar and Hizbul Mujahideen, and these guys get recognition from the US state. They also get lot of aids and grants also from the US state for the welfare and charity activities. More recently, coming to the Khalistanis, well, the Western world knows it very well that most of these gurudwaras are being controlled by the Khalistani elements, and they say that, well, we have a free society, we cannot control them. But still, I mean, these problems do exist, and many people in the Indian strategic quarters also, like on the condition of anonymity, they say that these things cannot go without the tacit acceptance or some kind of support system coming from the state. So we have to keep these things in mind.
Yes, so maybe that is something that is work in progress and we'll have to look at it more closely. But I'm afraid that's all the time I had this evening, gentlemen. I'll have to wrap it up here. Thank you very much, Ambassador Wadhwa. Thank you for joining us for the first time. And General Meston, who has been always kind enough to join MediaScan every time we have asked him. And also thanks to Abhinav Pandya for sharing those very interesting thoughts with us. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Viewers, if there is one thing on which all our guests agree, it is the fact that Indo-US relationship is at a point that it has never been before this, and it is all set to take a much bigger leap in the coming days right this month. However, there are elements who are trying to put a spanner on the good vibes, the good atmosphere of the trip and the relationship, and it is those which need to be watched in the coming days. On that note, it's a wrap up on MediaScan for this evening. See you next weekend. Namaskar.